You're listening to Redefine Her, where we amplify the voices redefining women's health and wellness. From bold innovators to resilient changemakers, we uncover the stories, ideas, and breakthroughs shaping a better future for women everywhere. This is your space for inspiration, advocacy, and transformation. Here we go. Let's redefine what's possible.
It's a healthy reminder for C-suite is if you want a thriving company and a thriving company culture and a healthy culture, you need to look at all areas of the organization and see if they are aligned with the values that you are putting forth when it comes to thinking about people's health and wellness. And specifically when it comes to mental well-being, not only, are we maybe slapping on some benefits and HR tools that you can get access to therapy, it's so much more than that, right? Because if you have all the resources and tools that you offer your employees and all these great benefits, and then your managers don't know how to manage people well, that can be a deal breaker.
Welcome to Redefine Her. Today we're speaking with Erica Hines, CEO of MindReels.ai and a certified worksite wellness consultant. We're diving into Erica's founder journey, how science and innovative tools can transform workplace health by addressing the critical connection between employee well-being, productivity, and corporate success. I'm so excited to talk with you today about your founder journey and what led you to MindReels. So let's jump right on in. Erica, you've had an incredible journey from a secure corporate role to founding MindReels. Can you take us back through your career and what was the moment when you decided to make that leap?
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to talk to you about how we can redefine mental well-being. And it really did start during my master's degree. I was studying health promotion as it relates to human resource management, so a very niche career as it relates to wellness. And I was very much focused in on how can we leverage behavior change and best practices to help corporations improve population health management. And I've always been very focused in on how technology can help support us do that. So, 20 years ago, we started implementing health risk assessments, asking people about their chronic health conditions and their behaviors and, their stages of readiness and trying to get an understanding of how do we move the needle. And I think we can all understand that making change is hard. And if we can implement science and really strong technical skills or technical tools to help us do that, corporations could really benefit from that because there's such a huge tie between the health of an individual and their work, not just through health insurance claims, but also through productivity and absenteeism and turnover and so many different indirect costs of poor health. And through that journey, I came to kind of do some research related to how health relates to productivity. And through that research, saw firsthand that mental well-being was really the cornerstone of overall health. So it came out in the data showing that people were truly suffering from mental health concerns, whether it be anxiety, depression, or other types of mental health illnesses. And seeing that in the data really firsthand, looking at against asthma and diabetes and all these kind of other physical ailments and diseases that we'd been studying over the years was really profound for me because I had always thought of almost like physical health as the cornerstone of overall wellness, right? Like we exercise and we eat well and you see it everywhere in the community, right? From the PT to the chiropractor to the gym, it's all around us, this emphasis on physical health. And it was turning point for me when I saw that mental wellness, our mental well-being was really, truly the cornerstone of overall health that pivoted that career. I think that was that moment where I was like, I want to do something different. And it might not have been the moment that where MindReels started to come to fruition, but it was that moment when I saw something from a different perspective, when I turned the corner and after I've looking at something the same way for 15 years, saw it differently and felt this need to action and felt this desire to truly be in service of others and help solve this problem.
With that, that takes a lot of trust, right? It takes a lot of trust in yourself. How did you move to this place despite all of the layers of potential uncertainty and fear and your own anxieties with it all, right? How did you move through that?
Well, first, after kind of that big realization, I ended up working for a number of different startups. And so then going into that environment and kind of testing the waters, I worked with a company that was bringing their solution to the United States. I worked for a unicorn startup. I worked and did some consulting for some other mental health startups. And so I got myself familiar with that ecosystem, right? Because jumping from working for a company for over a decade, having a really stable career, kind of doing product and being able to kind of touch a lot of different ends of the business, it still wasn't the startup life. And so I started by first kind of getting myself familiar in that ecosystem. And then there was just, would say, the universe kind of pushed me on the path too, without getting into like that whole narrative. There's just some things that just kind of happen. And you're like, oh, wow, like this is the path. It's so clear. This is what feels good. Am I scared? Absolutely. Is there fear around it? Absolutely. But I kind of kept getting pushed in this direction of like, no, like you are an entrepreneur. Like, you know, it's like funny. Every little questionnaire I ever took was like, you're an entrepreneur. I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. But it is. It's this moment of finding trust in yourself and finding trust in something bigger than yourself and jumping in and saying, it's going to be okay. I'm not going to end up on the streets. Like, we'll find a way, right? Like, and if it doesn't work out, then I'll just, we'll course correct. I know how to course correct. I know that what I do is valuable. I really need to step into this work and leverage my skills, leverage my passion, and follow my path. And I will say, yes, there has been some fear around it that I've had to clear and work with. And there's also been this huge step into my courage. And how you go about doing that, I think is very specific to the individual. But I will say that I leveraged a lot of tools, a lot of mentors, a lot of healers. Like it's really been this beautiful journey of me stepping into, what I'm really, I think, here to do.
Most definitely. And you'd shared that with me prior to us setting this up, that, one of your biggest challenges was actually leaving a company that you had been with for 10 years and had such an impact and had probably touched so many different areas of an organization, knowing, at your probably were this entrepreneur and you could do bigger and better things and evolve personally. Did you ever struggle with imposter syndrome?
So being in the wellness space and in the HR space, terms like imposter syndrome and burnout like come up very frequently. They've almost been used as like buzzwords, almost like presenteeism in some sense, right? So we hear these words and, the HR teams kind of attach them and say, okay, how does this relate to occupational health? And they both do very much relate to occupational health. When I think about imposter syndrome, I'm thinking about a term that talks about your self-worth and like chronically having self-worth issues to the point where you feel fraudulent. And just like burnout too, right? Burnout's just not like, oh, I had a stressful week. Burnout is a chronic, situation that is really serious. And so I like to be really thoughtful to say, no, I haven't experienced either of those, but I do value the heaviness of those terms. And I think in worksite wellness, we need to be thinking about that. Like, this is a question I get asked very often. Have you experienced burnout or imposter syndrome, in a way that sometimes makes me think like it's really common. And it can, in some situations, especially certain work occupations, be very common. So we think about the doctors during COVID, right? We saw a huge amount of burnout, right? And that's different from having a stressful work week. So I've actually never truly experienced burnout and or imposter syndrome, but I have certainly stepped into a room and questioned my self-worth or thought like, oh, do I belong here? But not to the extent that I would think it falls into kind of the seriousness of some of those, those terms. I mean, I think of imposter syndrome too as like a psychological trait, right? Like people pleasing or perfectionism. And so I think it's really important for us to kind of create some discussion around what those mean and what they mean to each individual so that we never, I'm really taking your question pretty far here, but I'm actually really passionate about this because it's so common in worksite wellness for some of the terminology to get misrepresented because it's like turns into a marketing campaign from an HR standpoint.
The array and the variability that people experience, both of these, is dramatically different in every situation. I think it goes back to, you mentioned earlier, we're constantly seeing you need to exercise, you need to work out, you need to do this or that. But we don't talk about mental health, and we don't talk about, yes, okay, so you're feeling a sense of burnout. Take a wellness day. Go do something for yourself. Extract yourself from what is causing a lot of this tension. So in your experience, how do you overcome questioning your self-worth or walking into a room and feeling maybe not as competent as the next person? How do you overcome that situation or that feeling? What do you do?
That's a great question. What I do personally is probably evolved over time. So I can more being in the present moment. What I do now is I'm just really observant. And so a non-judgment, kind of mindful observation of how I'm feeling. And so sometimes when I leave a situation, I'll be like really energized, or I'll kind of feel like a little icky about it. And so I kind of sit with that and I say, okay, what is that? And not to put projections on it, but just like really feel what I'm feeling. And not identify it as something or attached to something, but just feel through it, observe it, acknowledge it, and then work to transcend it. And that's just a practice, I think, that comes from years of like yoga and meditation, is this understanding that like you feel your feelings for a certain period of time. You don't want to stuff them, right? But like working through those feelings is really sitting with it, sitting in stillness with how you feel. And then working through some contemplation is like, where's that coming from? And how do I move that energy so I can move past it?
Definitely. And I think in the tech space, we talk about that frequently in terms of like, we're going to iterate, we're going to reflect and do a retrospective of what have we done here? What were these issues or whatever they might be? But personally, what were those feelings and why were they coming up for us? And how do we address, and I love that word you use, transcend them. So you were a major driver in creating the Health-Related Productivity Loss Index, which was a tool designed to measure productivity loss related to health challenges. And it's been used by over 1 million people and has significantly shaped workplace wellness programs nationwide. Tell me a little bit more about the gaps you feel that are present currently in wellness solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to talk a little bit about the HPLI and its kind of purpose was really to look at over 20 different health conditions and say, how are these health conditions impacting our ability to be productive at work, like our concentration, our ability to basically be present. And while I will say that research has its limitations, right? Because we're asking self-reported data. But we did do a 4-year study with over 22,000 individuals. And in looking at that data, we can start to see, the reliability and the validity and kind of test, like, are these metrics something that we can count on? And then we take that and try to establish an economic burden for an organization to say, okay, do we have a strong enough monetary burden here that there's a business case for investing in people's health? And productivity is just a piece of that puzzle, right? Because we can look at absenteeism, like different chronic illnesses creating us to be absent from work, the turnover. This is just one piece of a really big puzzle, but it's an important piece because if you think about your productivity, like your ability to get to work and do what you need to do. I mean, we've all had like the days where we have a headache. And it's like, I just didn't get done what I could have gotten done without that headache. And those just looking at the chronic illnesses, right? The chronic conditions like the neck pain or the gastro issues or asthma or allergies or whatever it may be. And we look at those and we say, wow, this is actually stopping people from being able to like participate fully in their day. And that's just not at work. That also would bleed into their family life. And so to me, that the connection between productivity also there can be a storyline, a narrative around like there's some level of suffering happening, whether it's like a physical ailment or whether it's a mental health condition. I think that there's a strong correlation to say when we look at these numbers, we can say, we really need to invest in helping people. And this is kind of an interesting perspective on how productivity actually relates to like overall, how are we thriving? But to better kind of address your question, I think that the underlining kind of story around some of this research is that if we don't help people address mental well-being, which we all have, right? So we all have mental well-being, just like we all have physical health. right? And if we don't help them kind of establish how to avoid dis-ease, right? Not just disease, but the dis-ease that can come from not paying attention and caring for our own mental well-being, that ultimately we're really missing an opportunity to help people thrive in life, not just in work, but in all areas of their life, whether it be their physical health or, how they show up at work or their relationships. So it's really like interconnected to everything. And a lot of people endlessly have a lot of chatter and think negative thoughts. And there's just a lack of awareness and mindfulness of that actually happening in their lives. So it's funny that this research that happened in 2018, that was like about chronic health conditions and all of this, that was meant to show that, diabetes and, migraines are really creating, a big economic burden for organizations, turned into this whole new narrative that like, oh no, we're like missing the ball here, right? Like we really need to help people understand that we need to find parity between physical well-being and mental well-being. And I think that's where we're headed.
Totally. So, with that, tell me a little bit more about Mind Reels and how Mind Reels is attempting to address this. And ultimately, our feeds are feeding us this message after message about fitness, running, Pilates, strength training, HIIT training, whatever it might be, right? Everything out there for our physical well-being, and mental well-being is being addressed more frequently, I would say, but there's definitely been a disparity between it. So what systematic changes do you think need to happen to change that narrative? And with Mind Reels, how are you tapping into that to address this?
I think the first thing that needs to happen from a systematic perspective is that we need to start innovating. So if you look at majority of startups in the mental well-being space and the mental health tech well-being space, a lot of them are solving for the same problem, and that's a lack of therapists. Now, I'm a big advocate of therapy, and I think that it's really important that we do solve for that issue. But for a majority of our startups to be focused in on that specific problem is meaning that they're not addressing some of the other problems. And to me, there's like a big elephant in the room, right? So we can see this correlation between like the endless, mindless media consumption, whether it's through scrolling or gaming or TV watching or news. Like we get so much stimulation, so much dopamine hits from the constant barrage of media. Now, the media that's coming to us is coming to us like just not only just like endlessly and creating some addictions, but there's also parallels to the increase in mental health illness and what's happened. And so I think what the problem we really need to be solving for is the unseen influences of this media consumption. So there's some statistics out there that say over 500,000 lifetimes are lost to endless scrolling. You lose your breath when you hear that. 500,000 lifetimes are lost to endless scrolling. Okay, so what we do know, and marketing folks will tell you this too, is that media is extremely powerful. If you watched the same snack commercial over and over again, just once a day, right? Maybe like 30 seconds every day, you would constantly think about that snack. You'd pick it up at the grocery store. It would occupy your thoughts, right? So media is powerful. So the idea behind Mind Reels is, can we flip the script and use media as a powerful tool for personal growth and self-discovery and mental well-being versus trying to say, well, we got to get rid of it, right? It's like, good luck, right? You think you're going to get rid of media consumption. That's an Everest task. But it's like, there's actually a lot of value in what it can do if we can do it in a way that represents our authenticity, that helps us drive looking inwards and self-discovery. And I think outside of the therapeutic setting, people don't have a lot of tools that help them go inwards. And so what Mind Reels is, it's at this intersection of like mental well-being and self-discovery and personal development. And we're looking at it from a different lens. Remember, I told you early on, I was like, oh, I turned the corner and I saw something different. Well, in working for these startups and these mental health companies, I was like, whoa, we are missing 3 major components in solving for the issues related to mental well-being. And that is, there is a lack of self-discovery. We are not addressing the unseen influences of media consumption. And third, and maybe the most important and the most exciting as it relates to AI, is this genuine personalization. And so if you go to a lot of meditation apps right now, what you'll find is like, oh, I've got anxiety. Okay, once again, or I've got imposter syndrome, or right. And we're attaching to these buckets and we say, I am this, right? And so now I have a meditation on that specific thing. And I think that's really doing us all a disservice because we're so much more complex. There's so many more nuances to who we are. And so if we can really get to what really drives people, what inspires them, what motivates them, what their purpose is, we can get them to content that becomes really relevant and really purposeful for them to drive change.
Love that you're doing this. It's reminding me of, I mean, we'll take it way back, but seatbelts, right? At one point we didn't have seatbelts. And then we realized, oh, maybe there's something else we can do to save lives from car accidents. Let's install seatbelts and then let's make it a law, right? There's such a gray area behind what are these devices doing to us right now and how can we prevent perhaps what some of that impact might be on our future. It's not going away, right? We're going to have this forever, and we're going to have media, and we're going to have these big players who are buying our time and doing everything possible to influence us. So in a way, it's like training our own algorithms, right? Your work with MindReels is bridging neuroscience, AI, and mental health. Tell me how this combination can create a more personalized approach to wellness, and how do we keep it authentic?
Actually, I want to back up because you said something really interesting when you talked about seatbelts. And so back in the day before we had social media and social marketing, there was a concept called social marketing. And it was this idea like, can we push something out to the population and drive them towards behavior change? And Click It or Ticket was one of those, right? It's like we helped people see like, oh, there's an incentive to putting that seatbelt on, right? And there's also a disincentive, and a disincentive being if you don't do it, you're going to get the ticket, right? And so that campaign changed the way that people, culturally, the way people chose to act when they get in a car. I mean, now it's like a no-brainer, right? And it's built into our laws. It's also built into the infrastructure of people driving cars. Like if you don't put your seatbelt on, it's going to bing at you until you put it on. And so that's such a great example. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's back in the day what we thought of as a social marketing campaign. And now can we take those types of concepts and help people better understand that this endless scrolling is really, really impactful? And so how we do that kind of gets us to what you wanted to talk about related to like AI and neuroscience and positive psychology and acceptance and commitment therapy. Like there's a lot of different applications of science that actually support what we're looking to do. And I think the way I like to think of it is if you ate really crappy fast food for like a week and then you ate the next week really healthy, you'd feel that contrast like, oh, yeah, this doesn't make me actually feel very good. There's a lot of regret there. I don't feel good. Like my body's not thriving on this type of food. But here I feel really good. And so if we can do that, right? So if we can show people like, oh, wow, I'm not even noticing like this endless media consumption, like my endless scrolling is really doing anything for me because I've never seen the opposing side of it. What does it look like to ingest uplifting media that's really hyper personalized to me, that's focused on the things that are important to me, that help drive change in me, that inspire me and invoke emotion in me? And all of that is related to us like leveraging that contrast so that once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And so then you want to choose to digest positive media and media that's very tuned into who you are and what you believe, not what other people are telling you you should believe. And so we do that by offering up like this opportunity of self-discovery. So we want people to find out, what does gratitude really mean to you, right? That's a great example. Oh, I want to be grateful. Okay, but what does that mean to you? Does that mean like I can find gratitude in a cup of coffee or in the ordinary? Or is it something more elaborate? Or is it related to some form of emotion? Like there's actually a lot to dig into that really separates, you and me. And then there's also a lot that allows us to find similarities. And so when we start collecting those insights, we can use AI, layer AI over top of it to be more honed into what is really relevant to you And when things are relevant to you, when they evoke emotion, and then we have a better opportunity to affect the neural pathways and thus changing the way you think, believe, your behaviors. And that's ultimately what helps you thrive in life, right? So there's a lot of application of science, and it comes from that, like evoking emotions, leveraging neuroplasticity, leveraging concepts, really like concepts in psychology, like acceptance and commitment therapy and positive psychology. We try to embed those together so that we can bring a product to market that's backed by science, but and leveraging all this science, right? We should be applying this into our technical tools, but and also really honing in on celebrating our authenticity and our diversity. And I think that's an important part of this, of the piece of this puzzle.
It brings to mind the word agency. You're creating this tool to give people their own agency in self-discovery, in how do we find we're much more like others than we are different. How do we take a look and retrospect on ourselves and what does make us feel good? What drives us, and what is like the meaning and purpose behind our own day-to-day lives and our interaction with others, right?
Yes, yes. And then when I talk about that intersection, right, that what you just said fits into that self-discovery, it fits into personal growth, it fits into the mental well-being. And then the other intersections are about finding mindfulness, right? That's all about awareness. Like if you don't ever look inwards and kind of like ask yourself these questions, you never shine a light on them, right? And there's no opportunity to leverage those tools and leverage that inspiration that's really built into us. And then furthermore, I think that there's a piece that's related to meditation and finding stillness and space between ourselves and our thoughts. And there's also a visualization component, right? We are very, very powerful when we can really define what our intentions are and visualize that. And so we're kind of using all of that together in order to provide a really powerful tool that hopefully will really move the needle for people.
I love that. I think it's also something we close off in our lives. Maybe we've had past experiences or we've had interactions or whatever it might be that block us from traveling down that path. Even like you mentioned visualization, and personally, I've had a new tool that I've been using, and it is visualizing, and it's like visualizing spirit animals, right? But in the past, it's been really difficult to actually visualize. And I think creating the space for it, opening it up and being open to the opportunity to leverage different tools that help us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I faced that same problem. So visualization has always been like a blocker for me, right? Because if someone's like, okay, visualize your future self. First of all, I have a hard time seeing like faces and visualization, anything, right? But on top of it, I've also like will find myself the minute someone says start visualizing, all of a sudden I'm down a rabbit hole. And yet I don't even know what I'm thinking about. I'm like, oh gosh, this isn't good. Like, what am I manifesting? Like, I don't even know what I was just thinking about. I totally get lost. And then that's part of the meditation practice, is pull yourself back in. But the really, really interesting thing about mind reels is that what happens is we generate these frames for you, and each of them are like these mini visualizations. And so when you're in a meditation practice or a visualization practice, you can anchor in on them. So when somebody says, okay, now close your eyes and visualize, I like just go through my frames, because one is about gratitude and one's about, yoga and meditation and nature being my anchors, or like, how water is like a sanctuary for me, all the way to, how I want to like build purpose in my life or release control or surrender to uncertainty. And so now it's so much easier for me to visualize like purposeful things, because I have these visual anchors, but from repeatedly watching my mind reels.
It's much more intentional.
It's much more intentional, and it makes the practice of visualization easier.
I believe it. I'm so excited for it. So tell me, what do you think the future of health looks like for you, particularly in the workplace, and how workplaces can support their team's mental well-being?
I'm a certified worksite wellness consultant, and that's like a level 4 certification, right? And what we do is we really dig in at each level into all the dynamics of workplace wellness. And I will tell you, there's just one thing that will always be true, is that your culture of your organization matters. what's being set up at the top matters. Your HR policies matter. Your PTO policy matters. Like all the things that relate to how people show up for work and how they show up for themselves in your environment matter. And so I will say that that is kind of known across kind of the worksite wellness professionals and hopefully well known in the HR world. But it's a healthy reminder for C-suites is if you want a thriving company and a thriving company culture and a healthy culture, you need to look at all areas of the organization and see if they are aligned with the values that you are putting forth when it comes to thinking about people's health and wellness. And specifically when it comes to mental well-being, not only, are we maybe slapping on some benefits and HR tools that you can get access to therapy, it's so much more than that, right? Because if you have all the resources and tools that you offer your employees and all these great benefits, and then your managers don't know how to manage people well, that can be a deal breaker. So I think it's the future is us really taking what we've learned from all this great research. There's been some amazing pioneers in worksite wellness and taking that and not making the same mistakes as it comes to mental well-being that we did with health. Right, when we talk about physical health, because we've already been through this a million times, right? Because every time there's a health condition that becomes top priority, that we hear about it from the CDC or WHO, all of a sudden it's a hot topic for HR, and then we address it. And so we need to take the lessons learned and apply them, especially when it comes to mental well-being. And it really is thinking about the culture. And just like in AI, right? We think about AI. AI can touch every area of your business. But if you got shitty data, you're going to have shitty AI results, right? So you have to think about how can we clean up across the board so that when we layer these programs on top, that we can make sure that they're actually propelling us forward towards our goal versus, creating silos or it's mismessaging, right? It's I feel like they care about my work site. They got all these tools, but my manager's not very nice to me. And, they could use some training on how to not create micro stressors or whatever it may be. So I think it's a comprehensive approach that we need to keep working towards moving forward when it comes to worksite wellness.
Most definitely. And I think you mentioned culture. And I think culture is so much more than kombucha on tap or early dismissal on Fridays. How do you define culture? What should leaders be looking at when it comes to culture?
Kombucha on tap. That's great. Oh my gosh. That'd be pretty fun. That's a really cute thought. But to your point, kombucha on tap is paying attention to the little details, right? Your gut health is important to us. And so we're going to make healthy foods available for you. But that's the thing, right? You show up in a meeting, right? And there's either donuts on the table or there's fruit that nobody touches. And so I think that when we look at population health management, we talk about culture, it is going into the granular, right? It's going in and saying, are what we doing, and this kind of comes back to what I previously said, it's kind of doing analysis and saying, okay, just are the decisions we're making, are the way the leaders are talking, do they align with the values of actually caring for people on a level that is, beyond always contemplating the bottom line? But I will tell you this. The reality is for companies who have a strong culture of wellness that really care deeply for the people and don't just see their people it's human capital, right? We value our people, we value their health, we value their mental health, that it goes beyond the bottom line, but ultimately it has a significant impact on the bottom line that isn't always seen in year 1 or year 2. So if you have a good company culture, good wellness programs, you really care about your individuals, I guarantee that the return on investment, whether you can measure it or not, because it's difficult to measure all of the direct and indirect costs that are related to a healthy company culture. Because we talked about this earlier, you have everything touches company culture, short-term and long-term disability, pharmaceutical costs, healthcare costs, presenteeism, absenteeism. I mean, start putting a dollar amount on all of those things. And if you're moving the needle in your culture, you're affecting all of those things positively. So you might not be able to measure it without an extensive, elaborate study. However, there is such a huge benefit to investing in people and investing into their health and wellness.
Well, and I think of it as like people want to be seen and heard and valued, and seeing them more than just a number. Loyalty and tenure are not always quantifiable, but the impact is huge. So you've built high-performing teams throughout your career, and as you bring MindReels into the market, what do you see as the 3 most critical actions to building a mission-aligned, purpose-driven team that would be capable of scaling MindReels and taking it to the next level?
Very, very, very much value people's authenticity. I think we think like us as energetic, vibrational beings, and the highest vibration that we can cultivate is when we are our authentic selves. And that's the good, bad, ugly, beautiful. It's everything. Building a team, building people who are coming on board, who are creating content and curating things that are like, designed to build emotion in people, that we want the things they're doing coming from a place of authenticity. And so I think that's like one of the most important things to me is I want people to come, be part of our team, be their authentic selves. And I think that's what I can do as a leader that's maybe going to have the biggest impact on us building and curating and creating something that is going to be hopefully helpful for millions of people. But I will also say, because you said there were 3, so there's the authentic component, but in our authenticity, it's okay for us to make mistakes. There's nothing worse than being in a work environment where you're like, I can't fail. But without ever failing, you never grow and learn. And sometimes we have to get that pressure cooker on for us to grow and learn. And we need to have a safe environment for people to do that. So we talk about like psychological safety. This is kind of a piece of that. It's really about saying you can come and be who you are, right? And I do really, really value inclusivity and authenticity and diversity in the workplace. And on top of that, giving people an opportunity to make mistakes and fall so that they can stand back up. And every time they stand back up, we're stronger and they're stronger. And I think that's, something that is a little bit more rare, in the work environment. And so that's an important value. And then certainly, obviously, we really value people's mental well-being. And so I think there's a lot of kind of policies and kind of infrastructure we can put in place as an organization to support people's well-being. I think what happens in a startup is there's this constant pressure for speed and like go, 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 go. And it's not to say that we don't have to move fast to market and that there isn't some level of urgency. But everything is not a fire. And that's an important component when we think about mental well-being and micro stressors. Are you showing up every day and your boss is just flying towards the next thing and deadline? Or are we leaving space to learn and grow and hear our customers? And I think that's another important value I want to make sure we put in place.
Totally. And it doesn't have to be a fire. It can be a spark, right? And ignite something new, something curious. I love that. So starting new companies, moving to a different company, changing roles, though you were in your last position for 10 years, anytime you make these changes requires redefining leadership. And you talk about authenticity, and you're one of the most authentic and bright, loving people that I have met.
Wow.
But how has your leadership style evolved? And how do you see it evolving as MindReels comes to fruition?
Funny enough, it was when I worked for that company for 10 years, and then I worked little more short term over the last 6 years for different startups. And I think it was in that transition, seeing other leaders in this space where I was like, oh, take a little bit of that. And I like a little bit of that and a little bit of this. And then I thought about it and I'm like, well, where do I sit? And it was really like, it was funny because I heard of this like concept of transformational leadership. And it's this like blend of like people who are really operationally sound. Like I want things clean and organized and efficient. and we're not siloed. We're like meld together really well. Oh, but we also have room for innovation and to think outside the box and kind of test the waters. And so I kind of feel like that's how I really define my leadership. And funny enough, I'm also ambidextrous. And I'm like, oh, that's also my leadership style. Like I can be a little bit of this and a little bit of this. Oh, and then when I work with this person who needs me to be, more this way, I can adapt. So it's this idea of like being adaptable and fluent and like operationally sound, but at the same time feeling that deep drive for innovation. And that took a couple of years to kind of really like define what that was. And I had to do it with intention. It wasn't like I woke up one day and I'm like, this is the kind of leader I want to be. It was observing other leaders. It was kind of taking the best and also matching with like what actually felt good and worked with like who I was authentically. And then spending some time reflecting and contemplating on what kind of leader I want to be with intention. And that's kind of what came from that time of kind of exploring that.
I think you've just coined the term ambidextrous leadership. I think
I've heard it before. It came across my desk somehow, and I'm like, yes, that's me.
I love that. I love it because you hear servant leadership all the time and all of these different taglines for what kind of a leader you are, right? But I love that. I am so grateful for your trust in having this conversation with me on Redefine Her. We've both taken bold steps in leaving the corporate world to create something special and redefine the norms of what's possible in our industries. Solopreneurship can be really challenging. Moving to funding and gaining buy-in can be so humbling. And launching like your most lovable product, as you call it, your MLP, into the world is often a roller coaster of joy, excitement, and fear. What are you doing to take care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally while you're navigating all of the challenges and opportunities of building something new?
This thought that things are a roller coaster is really true in the startup world, right? And it's like, if you attach to everything every day, like, well, that happened and this is bad and negative and, positive, and you could really it could have a really big impact on your mental well-being. So one of the first things that I do is I practice trust. Like, okay, we're going to go on this roller coaster ride. Put your seatbelt on. Maybe you got to put the things over the shoulder too. Grab a life vest, whatever you need. Just
depending on the day.
Yeah, depending on the day. It has truly been like very roller coastery, and the highs are high and sometimes the lows feel low, but I let it move quickly, right? I don't get stuck. And it's okay that some days are harder than others. I celebrate the small wins. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but we really do try to do that because it's fun. And this is a journey. Like, it's not just about an end destination. Like, all of this is also about my personal growth and development and the team around me. But to be more specific about like what I do outside of like managing my expectations and really focusing on trusting something bigger and knowing I'm right where I need to be. And yes, I don't always have to be positive all the time, but I always need to be optimistic is kind of how like I perceive it. But I would say it's also about leveraging all of the tools. I don't think I could do this any other time than I'm doing it right now because I've been practicing yoga for 20 years. I've also been in the health and wellness space for such a long time. So I've kind of learned what works and what doesn't work. I've built like a lot of tools in my toolkit. So it might be my meditation practice. It might be my mantra practice. It might be my yoga practice. There's like a number of tools that I've built up and I pick from them every day in order to stick with that trust, in order to observe, in order to be mindfulness, in order to increase my awareness. And all those things allow me to step into this role and building something that has uncertainty, that is kind of like taking a lot of courage and trust. And I don't know that I could do it without all those tools. So I leverage this really big toolbox. And I will say, if I were to give one piece of advice, right? If there was one tool, I would say, my gosh, that was game changing. I hate to say it's not yoga because it's all part of yoga. It's all part of a yogic lifestyle. But to be more like nuanced about it, it's my meditation practice. So sitting in stillness, learning all the different techniques and really kind of coming into that practice is changed the day to day. And so I'm really, really grateful for all the teachers and all the gurus who've helped, those practices come to fruition in my life.
Most definitely. And we both practiced yoga, and I'm reminded time and again that like the answers we seek are all within us, and like the tools like meditation and asana, but also community, like those things ground us and give us the opportunity to reflect back on our authentic self. And are we resonating at a level that is not true to ourselves? And how do we get back to that, right?
I think the community point that you just made is really important, because ultimately, what is this about? And ultimately, everything that I'm doing, while yes, there's personal growth and self-discovery in it for me, it's all about how do I step in and be in service of others? And this is what this venture is actually for me. This is me finding that. Like, oh, wow, this is actually how I make an impact. And this is how I become in service of others.
When I started Idiom, people asked me what inspired such a big life decision, leaving corporate world. And for me, it was more than just entrepreneurship. I mean, no one in my family was really an entrepreneur. My mom was always like, how did my kids do this? That was never our thing. But it was about that impact. And I wanted to shape a better future for my family and for the people that I work with. And I wanted to help my clients achieve their growth goals, as well as really helping candidates find meaningful opportunities that align with their purpose and their potential. And, if we give ourselves the space to uncover what is really important to us, the possibilities are endless, right? So my last question for you, your journey with Mind Reels reflects a similar drive to create meaningful change. Looking 10 years ahead, how do you envision your work influencing the conversation around mental well-being, both in the workplace, but really in the broader society? And in creating this space, what legacy do you hope to leave behind through your work?
Well, there was a thread that you just talked about that's really relevant here. And it is that thought of like, we need to give ourselves space to explore what our purpose is, what inspires us, what motivates us, and not what culture says, right? I think we can get lost in that so fast. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do, right? And this is where it comes back to like the product actually really doing exactly what I want to bring into the world, celebrating people's authenticity, what is really unique and important to them, giving them that self-discovery and that space to go inwards and find what that might be for themselves so that they can find ways to bring it to fruition. And so this is what I think reframing mental well-being is about, right? This isn't just like avoiding anxious thoughts. This is about finding your path, your purpose, understanding yourself better, maybe driving your spiritual wellness, like whatever it may be for you. But if you don't have an opportunity to go inward and have some of that guidance to explore, then you're really missing out on this opportunity for growth that, yes, can it be hard? Absolutely, right? But like on the other end of it, it's always beautiful, and nobody ever went through anything hard, and then said, oh, I wish I would have never done that, right? Like it's most of the time people say, wow, like I was in the cooker, but I came out, it's like in the pressure cooker and I've expanded. And so ultimately, yes, like this is part of something much bigger, right? Can we expand consciousness? Can we get people to see beyond what culture has told them to see and redefine how we think about mental wellness and mental well-being, and eventually gain that parity that we see with physical health? That would be an amazing legacy.
Definitely. And I think it is that like attracts like, right? So putting this out here and sharing what you're passionate about and building that connection for other people to experience it too.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And then when you step into your courage, you inspire other people to do it as well. Like you're going to be okay, right? One foot in front of another. And, it's, I hope that's part of the legacy too, is we can do hard things and
come out on the other side better. I have really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for being here. Give me a time frame for when our guests can expect Mind Reels to come to light.
We might have a brand change soon. We'll have to see. I think it's really important for us to think about the connotation around like specific terminology and what it might mean to people. So just be on the lookout for that. But we're hoping to launch by May, June with our most lovable product. So folks can be on the lookout and go to mindreels.ai and more about our product and hopefully how it can be in service of people improving their mental health and well-being.
That is so awesome. All right, mindreels.ai for now, but look out for what's to come. So exciting. Very cool. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was such a treat and so much fun. And I just appreciate you and all those really good questions.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Redefine Her. We hope Erica's insights have sparked your curiosity and encourage you to rethink the connection between health, science, and workplace success. Take a moment to reflect on your own algorithm, the patterns, habits, and choices shaping your own well-being, and consider how small, intentional changes can be and how they can create a ripple effect in your personal and professional life. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe here or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to share, like, and leave a review. Together, let's continue to redefine what's possible in women's health and wellness. Until next time, stay inspired, stay empowered, and keep redefining her. This episode of Redefine Her is produced by Taryn Long and Brenda Armstrong and proudly sponsored by Idiom Talent Partners, experts in search and placement services for health tech and femtech companies focused on building dynamic, inclusive teams. Learn more at idiomtalent.com.